In the previous segment, I briefly described a character archetype I called the Black Knight. This is the character that has a code of honor but still loyally serves an evil master. As I said before, many gamers tend to associate this archetype with lawful evil, when the truth is that it is much more representative of lawful neutral. The neutral alignments can be very difficult to describe as they deal in ambiguity. They're just not as clear-cut as the four extreme counterparts, which themselves can be very murky. The important thing to remember when trying to understand these alignments is which side of the spectrum is neutral. Lawful versus chaotic is dealing with belief, while good versus evil is dealing with motivation. That means if the belief spectrum, law and chaos, is neutral, then that character is ambiguous or limited on what their principles are. If the motivation spectrum, good-evil, is neutral, then the character is unsure about whether they care about others or not. In this case, we're dealing with a principled neutral character. As such, this is a character that is firm in their principles, but is unsure or limited in their motivations. In order to better understand this, why don't we take a look at our two examples. Our expected example has lived a long time and seen both blessing and tragedy. However, it is in the face of tragedy that she has devoted herself to a cause in an attempt at redemption. Our expected example is the beautiful, deadly, devout Justicar Samara of the Mass Effect trilogy. When the most talented of her three daughters, Morinth, chose a life of manipulation and murder, Samara swore herself to the code of the Justicar, becoming a paragon of justice in order to stop her. Having been on this path for centuries, Samara has traveled the stars, living as the code dictates. The reason why Samara is principled is obvious, but is the extent at which she is principled that is of note today. Samara has and never will disobey the code, even at the cost of lives. That is not to say that she will needlessly murder, only that if the code dictates that your life is forfeit because of your actions, then your life will be ended without hesitation. Regardless of her feelings on the matter, she will carry out the sentence. This fact is telling of why Samara is neutral. Though the code of the Justicar was designed as a force for good in the galaxy, she does not dispense justice out of conscience, but out of duty. Samara long ago gave up her personal motivations for the sake of her principles. Her devotion is best illustrated in Mass Effect 3 when Samara is faced with a harsh reality. The code calls for her to kill her last living daughter at no fault of her own. Samara admits that for the first time in her life, she is tempted to break her oath. But instead of doing this, she instead attempts to commit suicide, because that's not forbidden by the code. Though she wishes to act selflessly in this moment, she will not, because her code forbids it. On the flip side, though Samara isn't selfless, she's not selfish either, as is demonstrated when Shepard tries to romance her. Samara will express that she feels affection in return, and will even be tempted to reciprocate it, but will pull away at the last moment. See, even though the code does not forbid romantic relationships, she cannot allow herself to get involved in one, because she feels it will distract from her duty. Further, Mass Effect 2 reinforces this belief over motivation mechanically. Even though the player is capable of committing acts that would normally cause Samara to execute them, she will not, because when she joined the party, she swore an oath of subjugation, which is a part of the code that swears her to service to another's cause and morals. Convenience aside, it mechanically means that she will not kill Shepard even if she knows he or she deserves it. Samara is a great example of a lawful neutral character because she long ago gave herself up to become her principles. Her thoughts and feelings don't matter. All that matters is the code. Similarly, our next example also demonstrates the notion of principle over motivation. However, in this case, it's less about having given up himself and more about having lost what made him someone. Our next example is a man that can hardly be called a man. The loss of friends, family, body parts, and former principles has left him a cybernetic hollow shell, and one with breathing problems at that. Our next example is none other than Darth Vader. What? I'm sorry, Deadpool fans. I can't hear you over the hordes of angry Star Wars fans. Could you maybe speak up a little? Yes, Darth Vader, the character that is generally considered an icon of evil, yet is placed in a position of reverence by popular culture. Vader is not evil, my friends, at least not as far as D&D alignment is concerned, and I'm here to explain why. First, I must clarify, Star Wars is pretty big, and now with multiple continuities. So today we're going to be talking about Darth Vader from the original film trilogy, particularly from A New Hope. Many gamers would agree with me that the Sith Lord is lawful. He is a force for the Empire and loyally serves his master, Emperor Palpatine. Further, he's also a dedicated student of the dark side of the Force. Emperor Palpatine may be a merciless and power-hungry master, and the dark side may preach hate and greed, but both are a form of principle. For Darth Vader, Emperor Palpatine's will is a cause, and the dark side of the Force is a creed to live by. Just as Samara's code was created as a force for good, the dark side is a force for evil. And just as with Samara, Vader follows his code. But Dan, you cry or rage, you just said it! Darth Vader worships the dark side! The dark side is evil! Evil! And the Justicar's code is selfless, but Samara isn't. Vader, too, isn't a selfish person. He has no motivations. He has become far more machine than man. Consider the state that Darth Vader is in at the end of Revenge of the Sith. He burnt away everyone and everything he ever cherished in a grab for power that failed when he was mutilated by his former master and best friend. He is then rebuilt by his new master that he intended to betray and told that his last vestige of hope and humanity, his beloved and pregnant Padme, is dead. Anything that remained of Anakin Skywalker was buried so deep beneath despair and self-loathing that the being that remained, the cyborg known as Darth Vader, gave himself over to his new principles. Under these principles, he committed heinous acts such as torture, betrayal, and genocide, but he did so without any motivations. Vader did anything that seemed the most efficient way to carry out his orders and to live by the dark side. There was no selfish intent behind torturing Princess Leia for information, only a goal set by his master and a means to achieve it. The same could have been said for the destruction of Alderaan if it hadn't been Tarkin that had ordered the attack. Over the course of the trilogy, we see his emotions reawaken when he learns that his son is alive, and he struggles against his devotion to his principles. But this really only reinforces that his devotion to the principles was there in the first place. The natural state of the character, the one that we meet in A New Hope, is a tool of the Empire. There's nothing left in which to be more than that. He follows orders and upholds the ideals of his principles, all without selfish or selfless motivation. Darth Vader is principled neutral. So what can we learn about this alignment from these two people, and what about that Black Knight archetype that I keep mentioning? What all three have in common is that they uphold their principles over personal motivation. Whether they do so in spite of that motivation, or whether they have simply lost it, the lawful neutral character is one that has no motivation. All this character has is their principles. Any selfless or selfish motivation is either squelched or lacking. Now that we've seen two examples of motivation-related ambiguity, it's time that we tackle the middle column of the chart, starting with some ambiguous beliefs. Next time, let's kick off the final stretch of the series by talking about what it means to be neutral good.